So next I'm going to have my experts introduce themselves, Lindy, Smiley, and then Cathy, Muth.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Lindy Smiley. I'm the head of human resources for Starwood Property Trust, which is a commercial mortgage REIT located in Miami Beach. And I've been part of TCI for over 7 years, also on the board and currently co-president.
Great. And Cathy.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Cathy Muth. I'm the CEO of two companies, O Associates, that we provide real estate services for the public sector. So we buy land and relocate people for highways and airports and projects like that on the public sector. And then in 2010, we formed a separate company to do the same services for utility companies. And that company is ORC Utility and Infrastructure Land Services. It has been on the Inc. 5000 for the past 2 years. So it's done very, very well. It was a good idea to diversify in that direction.
And both you and Maureen have been on our Top Women, TCI Top Women State of Florida too for several years now. So welcome and thank you. I did put the questions if anyone wants to follow along. I'll also read them, but I did put the questions that we're going to go over in the chat. So the first question, sticking with my plan with the ABC kind of plan, goes to Cathy first. And here's the question. I need to put together a team from different departments for a special project. What do I need to do to get the right people?
Okay, well, I think it would depend on the special project. For instance, recently we built a separate level leadership team for our company, and we looked for people who were capable of strategic thinking from various departments to put on this leadership group. So, you know, being a special project, I think generally you would look for strategic thinkers, but that may not be the case. You may have a technical project, you know, maybe you're designing a widget or something and you need somebody who's not strategic but has technical proficiency. Whenever I build a team, I like to have diversity on it, and by that I mean balance. So initially, when I built my leadership team, we were using personality profiling. You know how there's millions of them out there. The one we use currently is called the Big Five, actually. And you look for people in each quadrant. You want balance on your team. So you want somebody who is a driver, you want somebody who's analytical, you want somebody who's expressive, and you want somebody who is whatever the other quadrant is. Somebody from right management can help me out with this. But you know, you want balance. You don't want all drivers or all analytical people on your team. You want people who complement each other.
Yeah, and a little bit later, I would love to hear from right management also what tools you guys use or have liked in you know, putting teams together. Lindy.
Yeah, so building on that, a few things come to mind. Bringing in people at different levels, which kind of builds on their skill sets and what they can bring to the table, different backgrounds. I think, you know, there's also more of an emphasis or just a more holistic view at diversity and inclusion on a lot of projects right now. As an example, I recently formed an ESG committee, which is environmental sustainability and governance, where we're focusing on all sorts of different things. And when we put together the committee, we really wanted to get representation from different businesses, but we also, just in terms of race and gender and skill sets, levels within the organization and different experiences. So really kind of taking a more holistic view for how you build the team versus, you know, the top 5 people that come to mind.
Great, thank you. Next question, Lindy, we'll start with you. What are the most important, soft skills to consider?
Is this like in general or?
In
For a
putting
project?
putting a team together.
Okay.
In general.
I mean, I think listening skills are super important. You know, it's great to have a lot of ideas and be vocal, but I think you need a balance of people that are the listeners, kind of what Cathy was saying before, like you want the different personality traits, but I think listening skills are key. I think being self-aware is key, so that, you know, if you're participating in a project, you can sense, you know, how your ideas or vision is being perceived, so that you could, you know, appropriately add value to the team. But those are the things that kind of come to mind.
Great, thank you. And Cathy, soft skills to consider, most important soft skills to consider.
I think there's a phrase for this, and I can't remember what it is, but you know, it's emotional intelligence is obviously something that's highly valued, and we women call that intuition, I think. So we tend to have more of that, I think, than our male counterparts do. Communication skills in general and listening is a big part of your communication skills, because most people spend their time, instead of listening, just preparing how they're going to respond. So they're not really listening. And then in our groups, we always tell our group that the phrase con in conversation means with. So in a conversation, we're not looking to see whose idea is going to win, but we want to have ideas from all around the table. And then together we want to find a new idea that none of us had. So, you know, it's not that my idea won, but that we all had input to a better idea than any one of us had alone.
Great, thank you. Let's just go back for a second to the assessments. As anybody have a favorite that they're using in putting their team together? Love to share experiences. Barry. Go ahead, Barry. You're muted.
I know, for whatever reason, it wouldn't work. So I've been trained in corporate and leadership coaching, and we use emotional intelligence, the EQI 2.0 a lot. It works really well with groups and teams. There's also another one I was trained in, which is called print assessment, and that uncovers unconscious motivators. Not as well known, but it's big in the corporate world. And I really, since I found that one, I'm just blown away with it. And then also I use energy leadership, because energy leadership helps see what's going on with different people.
Anyone else have one that they really like, that they want to share?
Well, I have two I'll talk about. We use the Big Five for everybody, because we give that to people after they're hired, so that the other team members have already taken the Big Five, and it helps everybody on the team to get to know each other faster. And recently we started using a test called the MEDAL, which is a learning agility test. So we're really looking for people who have high learning agility, because we find that they are the most successful employees.
When you say MEDAL, is it MEDAL or T? You said, I heard you.
I'll look that up and put it in the text box.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm not real sure how it's spelled. It's an acronym, obviously, for something much bigger.
Yeah. And Barry, if you could I see that Lisa's asking, either say it, but even put it in the chat too.
I am.
Maureen, Lisa, anything that you're using?
So, we use assessments for so many reasons. So certainly for selection, for development, Cathy mentioned team building. So there's so many assessments that you can use for different purposes. In the career management arena, we use the Berkman a lot, which allows us to understand people's strengths, their preferred method of style, their interests, and that helps in terms of career assessment. From a team building perspective, an easy one to use is the disc. We've used that with our team, and we found it really, really helpful because, to your point, Cathy, that will identify the different strengths inside the team. And you will find that you may have a team of people that are, all alike. And so it's good to know that they're all alike, because you can understand why each other works the way they are. And then, of course, everybody knows the MBTI. And then the last one that we use a lot with executives is the Hogan. And of course, we have a whole host of others, but those are the ones that I would say that we are use pretty regularly. Lisa, anything you want to add to that?
Those were the ones that I was thinking of. I think from a career management, we use the Berkman the most.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know from a leadership development, I think we, as Maureen pointed out, the Hogan.
Yeah.
And we've used the DISC internally, and that was kind of a fun exercise to learn a little bit about yourself as well as your colleagues.
Is the DISC the same as the Strength Finders?
No, it's a different assessment. It's different.
Great. And if you would put just some of what you just went over in the chat for everybody to see too. Sure. Thanks, Barry. I see that you put that there. So the third question, and let me see, I think we're on Cathy first. What do I need to make my team cohesive and hardworking?
Shared goals, shared understanding of what your goals are. And when we build a new team, we also, the first thing we do is write a team charter for that team. So there's an understanding of what the responsibilities are and what courtesies, we expect within the team in terms of listening, attendance, following through on assignments and things like that. It never hurts to, it always helps to get very clear expectations and shared expectations of the team. And then setting goals, assigning ownership when things are due, and having a commitment. One of the things we do at our company is have a commitment to following through on our responsibilities. So that doesn't mean that you can never miss a goal. For instance, if I tell you I'll have something to you by Friday, something else may come up. Maybe a big proposal has to go out and the person can't do it by Friday, but they owe it to the rest of the team to get back to them and say, I'm sorry, this has come up. I need to delay that delivery until Monday. And that's fine, but you need to communicate that because some other priorities do come up always.
Great, thank you. Lindy, what do I need to do to make my team cohesive and hardworking?
Well, I was about to suggest the charter as well. I actually have personal experience doing that when I went back to for my MBA, when we were assigned teams at the very beginning of the program, and we were told, like, this is basically your family for the next 2 years. And we put together a charter, which I think really helped. I also think, in terms of getting the team to be cohesive, it's not something that happens overnight. I mean, I think it depends if people know each other before or not, but if there's an opportunity to kind of talk in a more casual setting for people to get to know each other before you really get into it, to share their experiences and their backgrounds and, sort of like an icebreaker, so to speak. I mean, now we can't really go for a drink, but we could have a Zoom. So I think sometimes just like sharing your stories and just, getting to know each other a little bit makes it a little more comfortable to sort of, build that cohesive team.
Right, thank you. Anyone else want to add anything to that question on what's worked for you in cohesive and hardworking?
So, Lori, one of the things that we have been doing for years is creating an annual goals conference. The entire team comes together from around the state, and then we typically spend that day celebrating last year's accomplishments and then looking towards scheduling the goals for the year. And then we work through those goals throughout the year. So I think coming together with that shared vision and what we want to accomplish and then checking in every quarter has been really helpful for us.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Next question, Lindy, and this is yours first. How can I build trust with my team? And you kind of added a little something to this, and foster an environment where they'll all speak up.
You know, it's interesting. In my experience managing teams, you know, you always have a lot of different types of personalities, right? Like you have the person who's right away speaks up, and then you have the person who's listening and very quiet. I mean, I think that sometimes you can't expect that everyone's going to speak up, especially in front of a crowd. Some people just aren't comfortable with that. And so if you see that someone on your team has something to say or adds a lot of value, but you're finding that they're not speaking up, maybe pull them aside and have a conversation and allow them to share with you privately, and maybe help build them up a little bit to talk more openly amongst the group. But I think you have to accept that not everyone is going to feel comfortable speaking up. I mean, you can tell people as much as you want in a group setting that, you know, all voices should be heard and there aren't any silly questions or comments. But, you know, so I think sometimes it's just someone's personality trait, and you have to learn to adapt and get the best that you can out of everybody.
Cathy, same question. How do I build trust with my team and foster an environment where they all speak up?
Well, we tell our team, especially at the executive level, that we really expect to disagree and have different ideas when we're meeting together. That's what we want. I certainly don't want a bunch of people that just agree with me, or yes people. But that once we agree on something, that we all leave the meeting on the same page, that we all agree that we will support whatever decision we make as a group. But we actually encourage people to disagree in the meeting. And if they have anything, any concerns or hesitation about something that we're considering doing, that they should, this is the place to express those concerns and air those concerns and work through them. And, maybe they have a really valid concern, and maybe something will get shelved because that needs to be explored. But we really encourage people essentially to disagree and to, share what they really feel like. And it works pretty well.
So, Lindy, something you said, I've been in meetings where everyone go around and everyone speaks, but you said some people aren't comfortable. Is that even effective? I mean, I was just curious, does that ever help to go and have everyone called on?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely helps when you go around the room, but it's definitely a way. It's just that if you're really trying to get specific feedback out of people, I'm just saying, like, you're not always going to get it. But yes, I mean, obviously calling on people or going around the room will put them on the spot. The thing is, will they be as upfront as you want them to be just because you called on them?
Yeah, and I'm guessing, I mean, I don't know them. I'm asking this question. Is it better that if you're going to do that, when somebody comes into a meeting, that they should know before they come in the meeting that everyone's going to be called on?
No, not necessarily. I mean, can't give everybody warning on everything. I mean, I would assume if someone's coming into a meeting, there's somewhat of an expectation they might have to speak.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anyone else want to add to that before we move on building trust and fostering an environment that's worked for you all for speaking up?
So I would add to that, one of the things that I just recently became aware of that I think is really powerful is if you have those people that are quiet as leaders, sometimes you can share what might be discussed beforehand, or especially if you're working on a new project, to help people that take longer to process, that aren't speaking at the time, to give them that warning so they can come into the meeting with their ideas. And then for the people that are really high action people that want to start moving right away, to be able to slow them down a little, that this is the time where we're going to brainstorm every idea and there's no good or bad, but we're just going to go through everything. And when I heard that, just giving those people the advance, that's part of being a good leader and a good team person to be able to do that. So I wanted to share that.
Thank you.
I'll add something too, that a few years ago, I read The Speed of Trust, and then I created like a whole day, kind of a retreat with my staff. And we started talking about the roots in the tree. And if you've read that book, you know what I'm talking about. And it gave them a little bit more of kind of the steps on how to do that, and just that knowledge base, I guess. We haven't done it in a while, and we do have new team members, but I did get good feedback from just spending the day with them, just talking about the issue of trust. So,
and if you would put that in that book in the chat as well, it sounds like an interesting book, and maybe even one we should look at for our emotional intelligence leadership competency next year, Q2. Next question, and Cathy, I think you're up first on this one. What are your tips to finding people with the mindset needed to be successful for a team?
Well, my biggest tip you can find in a book by Tom Foster called Hiring Talent. And I'll put that in the chat box in a minute. It's based on the teachings of Elliot Jacks. And Elliot Jacks was from the 1950s, a very academic psychiatrist, actually, who went into business consulting and was used very much by the military. Is anybody on the call familiar with Elliot Jacks at all? And levels of work? So this is incredible. Once you understand the levels of work, which is Tom Foster's book, a short little book, not a long read, but it'll change your mindset completely about how you look for the right person to fill a position. He shows a pyramid that shows that of all the population in the world, there's like 5% of the population that has like a 1-day time span. And 20% of the population has a 2-week time span. This has nothing to do with IQ, because you could have an engineer with a 2-week time span who's brilliant and can design a bridge in 2 weeks, but then give him another bridge to design because he's just going to do the same thing over and over and over in that 2-week time period. Different thing, a 2-week time period. Then you have another 20% of the population who has up to a 2-year time span. And then as you go up, it's a smaller and smaller percentage that has a larger time span. So you have the 2-week time span are the people that do the work. The 2-year time span are the managers who manage the people who do the work. The level above that are people who create systems that the managers use to manage the people who do the work. And the level above that, level 4, are people who integrate systems, who can take multiple systems and integrate them for your business. And that's a very small percentage of the population who's capable of integrating systems. So if you look at your job descriptions in terms of what do they need to do? Is it going to manage a process that already exists? Are they going to create a system for a process they have? Are they going to have to manage multiple systems within our organization? If you know what level of work you're looking for, it really, really, really clarifies getting the right person on the seat on the bus. So it's not just about the mindset needed, but the skill set needed to be the right person on that team.
And write that in the chat for us too, please.
Okay.
Lindy, what are your tips to finding people with mindset needed to be successful for a team?
And a couple things come to mind. Something that just popped into my head is just someone's track record or their history, not just in what they do in work, but maybe outside of life. Like, what kind of discipline does the person have? Where they, depending on their experience level, it may or may not be relevant anymore. But you bring up the military. Like, I think someone that's that has experience in the military is going to be super disciplined about following through. Someone who is an athlete, who is part of a team, who consistently does a sport or a hobby. I mean, those are some of the sort of atypical things that you might look at about the person outside of just their job performance or their skill set, because I do think that one's discipline and follow through on other things in life will carry through to their job as well. And then again, like to build on what Cathy says, like if you're trying to build a team, it's like a puzzle. And so I think you need to make sure that you have all the different pieces of the puzzle. And I think that's the example that Cathy was trying to give.
Yeah. Maureen, Lisa, anyone else on that question?
I like people who are interested in sports too, because often it signifies that they're competitive, and competitive people just are good performers.
So next question, and we're kind of going a little bit into some of next month's talk, but they were asked for this one, so we're going to ask them. Any advice on how to help the team hold each other accountable? And I know we talked about the charter. I love that idea. That's the first I've heard with charters, and I love that idea. But anything else? Any advice on how to help the team hold each other accountable? And gosh, I lost count because I don't have my method of writing down the M and the S.
I think it was me. I mean, sometimes I think pairing people off so they have like a buddy, and then they can kind of kick each other, when the other one's maybe falling short. So if you give assignments out in the team, do it in a little bit of a group, mini group format, so they hold, so that they're responsible for each other. You have to set deadlines, obviously, and goals. Those are super important. And sometimes you have to have consequences if those goals aren't met. I mean, I think that holds accountability for people. I mean, depending on if it's monetary or otherwise, but there's got to be some kind of a carrot, so to speak, for holding people accountable. I mean, I think some people will just be accountable because that's their nature, and other people you'll find in a team environment may not be the ones to step up to the plate. And I think you just have to kind of get to know them. And the most important thing too is just dealing with it. Don't let it fester. So, the first time you see something that doesn't look right, or someone's not meeting a deadline or a goal, I think it's important to address it and make it very clear what your expectations are and what the consequences will be if they don't meet those expectations.
Great, thanks. Cathy.
I think having your goals written, and a matrix of, who's responsible for that goal. We call it the owner. What the tasks are that we agree on to get that goal done, and, when each of those tasks is due. And then reporting back, on when it's actually done. People tend to hold themselves accountable because they can see it in black and white.
There was any ideas, anyone, I'll open this one up. What has worked for you from, I think the first thing that comes to mind as working and accountable is if there's, a team bonus at the end of a project, but so that's a good carrot, but with like consequences or other carrots, any suggestions on those? And I'm opening it to anyone, including my experts. What would be some examples of carrots or consequences?
I mean, a carrot could be a promotion, right? If somebody's super successful on a project and they're sort of leading to, let's say that's building to the next level, that could be an incentive for them. It sounds harsh, but obviously a consequence would be, their job, right? Maybe it wouldn't be that black and white of, okay, if you didn't do super well on this project, you're gone. But I would think someone's incentive would be just to sustain their jobs.
Yeah. Anyone else? Maureen, are you looking to unmute?
Okay. So I think people, by their nature, want to be successful and want to surround themselves with successful people. So if you set the goals and the expectations and you as the leader are monitoring them, people will rise to that challenge. I think, if we as leaders don't keep the team accountable, then they don't have to be accountable. So I think it kind of works both ways. I think we all like to be surrounded with successful people and feel that we are achieving our goals and doing really well. So, I haven't really seen that as an obstacle. Lisa, your thoughts?
Right, you're muted.
Unmute. How
Sorry
many
about
times
that.
do you say that?
I know, and I keep muting and unmuting myself depending on what I'm doing. No, I tend to agree with what Maureen said. I think, here at Right Florida Caribbean, we do have a tendency to really work, as a team in groups quite frequently in the majority of things that we're doing. And I think in many cases, individuals are kind of hardwired. They want to come through for their team members. They want to be, they naturally tend to be accountable. And I think when you know that you're working in a team like that, and you know that if you don't come through with what your part of that project is, you're really letting down your team members. I think that can be the motivation. And I think also it's an opportunity sometimes to tap an individual to take on a project or lead a project that may be a stretch goal for them. So it kind of gives them a chance to develop some additional new skills, and that could be the motivation for them.
Mm-hmm. Mary.
So I was going to ask, just going back to the word accountable, in the team charter sounds familiar to me, but I haven't worked with it, but we do something called a team alliance, and the team alliance does address the accountability piece. So I'm not sure if the charter does. So I think that that's an important thing because, that's holding each other accountable on the team for how they want to, and they set that from the beginning.
Right.
And so I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Lindy, Cathy, do your charters did they have anything about dealing with that issue in your charters?
They can have anything. The charter is what the group wants it to be. But, accountability is probably always in there.
Yeah. Lindy, did your MBA program have anything on that?
Yeah, it's hard to remember back specifically, but I mean, it definitely talked about accountability and how we would address it, that we would discuss it with the person, and, that we were all there basically to support each other, and that if one falls, we all fall. And it really helped. We put it in place right in the beginning. It was actually an idea from one of the members of the team, and we were very successful.
Yeah, I love that idea. And I can't help but think, so our admin assistant is a senior in FIU, and she was bemoaning the fact that her team and the project, she did it all. And, the consequence if it didn't get done was not a good grade. And she's this super driven young woman. And so it makes me go back to, we're missing, if it's being missed, this charter in the MBA program, clearly you guys did it right. But way back in college or even high school, part of curriculums that piece is missing. Mm-hmm. Not that we can solve that problem today, but just that.
You know what, Lori? I have the opportunity to work with a lot of undergraduate college students, and that question, as Jessica said, sort of it was the consequence was the team as a whole didn't get a good grade if the project didn't go well. And so that kind of puts the pressure on the individual that is going to take that initiative. And, I've had a conversation with some of the professors as to why do they do that. And what they've really said is the skill they're trying to develop in the individual is to learn how to lead and how to work collaboratively. And that's why, and they're well aware that in many cases, and, using Jessica as our example today, Jessica did most of the heavy lifting. She may have done most of the work, But at the end of the day, the professor isn't necessarily grading the group just on the outcome of the project, but the lesson, the skill that the professor is trying to teach the group is how to step up, how to be a leader, how to delegate, how to be able to work collaboratively, which many of these students, are going to need to do when they get into the workforce. So it's been a very yin and yang, and very, I'm sure, as a coach, you've seen and heard this as well. It's very much a yin and yang that's there. So it isn't so much the consequence as maybe developing skills.
Oh, Jessica, tell Daniela that in your next mentoring session.
Mm-hmm.
Tell her that story.
That was really good.
Heather, did you want to? Oh.
Yeah. I'll just say I've led many teams, and the team that was the most successful in my career was where the team members held each other accountable. And because we have accreditation and licensing and all these things that we are accountable to as a group, they wouldn't see somebody do the wrong thing and go, okay, I'm okay with that. Like, it was upsetting to them personally, and they were invested, I guess, in the larger outcome. And that's a hard skill to just say to your colleague and your friend, hey, you didn't do that right. And that's going to hurt us all. But it's that one team that I saw my best leaders grow from. And they were the most successful and the best quality I'd ever seen in any team. So I don't know how to replicate it, but it worked well.
That would be it. Yep. If you go back and figure how you got to that part, please let us all know.
Okay.
Anyone else? Barry, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to go back to the alliance, because maybe this is where it's different than the team charter, but we had 3 specific areas that we hit, and accountability was one of them. So it sometimes sounded repetitive of what the team was committing to, but perhaps that's how it's addressed, and perhaps that's what happened in the example that Heather's describing as well, is they really understood. I think when groups understand the big picture and they're not just in their little piece, it helps them to see what the consequences are for the whole group if that doesn't happen. And even to Lisa's comment with the colleges, so I think back to that, and I think it's really interesting. And then part of it is, I think sometimes we don't do a good job at the lower levels really teaching people about some of the skills that they'll need later on. And while the professor is doing that, there's some professors that will spoon feed and others that'll just let them go. And so that's an interesting, I want to think about that more.
Yeah, I mean, I've done some work with both FIU and UCF. So I've heard that story and seen that philosophy from those particular schools.
Yeah.
Barry, is your alliance, is that something that has some kind of a template form that you could share, or is that proprietary?
I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
It's not mine, but it was from my corporate and leadership coaching program. So I don't know if it's, we do it as coaches. I mean, I've run it with companies.
Right.
And what happens, just to that point, is sometimes I've done it with organizations that have been together for a while, and all kinds of stuff comes out during the alliance, and sometimes you just stop and deviate for a little while to solve problems. But I'll get back to you on that, Lori, and if it's something I could share, I will.
Yep, thanks. Last question, and then we can open it up if there's any other thoughts, questions from the floor, and again, then we'll finish our Fridays. What are some concepts of accountability and follow through for leaders? And I think that we're Cathy first on this one.
Okay, so I'm going to tell a story. Years ago, maybe 20 years ago, I had an HR person who really wanted us to start doing performance reviews and hold people accountable. And my first reaction to that was a very negative reaction, because in my mind, accountability meant punishing somebody if they didn't do what was expected of them. So, I said at the time, and we weren't ready for it yet, but I said at the time, if we ever do performance reviews, I want my managers trained to be coaches. I don't want this to be a negative experience. I want it to be a growing experience for people. And So over the years, we've tried different things, and we're doing them right now. So I'm very proud of the way we're doing performance reviews now. But the key to the performance review is metrics. You have to figure out what your metrics are for your company, and they're different for every company. And it took me a long time to get to the metrics we have now. You know, whatever you decide your metrics are right now are probably not what you're going to believe they are 5 years from now, because it's not easy to get your metrics right. That's probably the most difficult thing we ever did, was try to get our metrics right. So when you have metrics that are the right metrics for your company, and then you set goals for your managers and your people around those metrics, they hold themselves accountable. So we've had managers over the years who could not meet their metrics, and they left the company. We didn't have to fire anybody. They just knew, they could see that they could not do what they were expected to do because they weren't making their metrics. Every month when they looked at their metrics, they were falling short. So, you know, there were at least 2 cases I can remember where people on a very friendly basis said, gee, you know, I've accepted this opportunity with another company, but we knew they were failing, and they knew they were failing. So getting your metrics and setting your goals around those metrics it's the ideal way to hold people accountable, because the expectations are clear. It's, you know, and if they know exactly what's expected of them, they'll do their very best to achieve that. And if they can, they will achieve it. And if they can't, they're the wrong person for the job.
Lindy. Wait, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I agree with the metrics on the performance evaluation. I kept reading the question to see, you know, more specifically what it was trying to get at. But just another thing that comes to mind, and maybe I'm just thinking of it differently, but I find a lot of times, and maybe it's not so much for a project, but leaders and managers feel like, okay, well, I'm in charge and I assign the project or I assign the work and I just let everybody go off and do what they need to do. And, you know, I think being a good leader and holding people accountable is an ongoing job. And it's also a responsibility that you have to the people that work for you. And one of the biggest frustrations I see here in my role in HR is that so many leaders don't spend any time with their people. They don't have regular meetings. They don't have one-on-one meetings. So when you go back and look at all the questions we've talked about building trust and accountability and having people be successful, you know, it's kind of like you get out what you put in. And I think that the time you spend with your people is so valuable. And I think the more that you take that time to listen and to not just hear about their work, but maybe, you know, if they want to share something personal, especially in a time like, you know, COVID, where everybody has so much that they have on their plate. And I think, you know, and I've learned this just being in the HR role and trying to get people back to the office and everyone having personal circumstances. I mean, everyone has something that they're dealing with. It doesn't matter if it's big or small, if it's health, if it's family, if it's money. And I think you have to look at the full person and not just the job that you're asking them to do. So, and I think if you think of all of those things and you put in that time, I think people will want to bleed for you a little bit more. And they're going to just naturally want to be accountable.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to add? And, you know, and I mean, there was one thing, I'm seeing that there's this move away from an annual performance review, and that it's a thing of the past. But Lindy, you're smiling. Does that mean you're having to do them right now?
No, I mean, it's definitely a trend, but here's the challenge with it. You know, it all depends on the environment that you work in. But I just mentioned that managers never get together with their people. So imagine if you got rid of the annual performance review or the mid-year check-in. You know, talk about accountability. I mean, I don't know that people would speak all year. So, I mean, in real estate and financial services, we're not there yet. I know some of the accounting firms and some of the more of the tech firms have done away with that. But it's an interesting concept. But look, the whole idea is that you shouldn't wait to talk to someone once a year. You should be talking to them every day, every week. So look, we know most managers hate doing them, but fortunately or unfortunately, I think it creates discipline on both sides to have that conversation.
Any last comments, thoughts, responses, questions? We've got 5 minutes left. Barry.
Well, I was just going to build on what Lindy just said. I think that there's opportunity to have the interaction going on all the time and a, whatever it is, whether it's semi-annual or annual, more of a formal process just to make sure that that does happen. But I think that is part of good leadership today, is that you're constantly coaching people and helping people to get to where they need. And there's an exercise that I saw, this just came back with the metrics. If you didn't have the metrics when something started, to be able to do it later. I don't know if any of you have heard of John Spence, but he had a 4-page exercise that he does with employees that maybe aren't cutting the mustard. And then what happens is exactly what Catherine described, is people know in that 90-day period where they're kind of like checking out, either they're going to make it or they're not going to make it. And I like the way he shared the process. So if you want, just, Google it, I'll write the name in here, but I thought that was a really cool exercise, and I've shared it with some of my clients and some of my friends, and they've all like really come back and said, wow, this was really effective and really great. So
great, thank you. Yep, if you'll share that. Anything
I'll
else?
add something, but just one more thing. I think maybe a topic for another time could be when that is, how sometimes when you overuse strengths, it's really a negative. We definitely have somebody in our team who likes to play in other team members' sandboxes. So it's beyond just kind of, brainstorming or having a different opinion. And so how do you deal with, sandbox playing and maybe throwing some sand and stuff like that? So maybe that could be a discussion for another time, but
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, in our last 3 minutes, anybody have a piece of advice for Heather on that? Is that you're saying keep them in their lane when they're just veering way outside of their lane?
Yeah. So what I do to that person is I then think of 100 more projects that they could be doing. And I start sending emails on all these things I want them to do, because obviously they don't have enough work to do. But that's draining on me too. And it hurts the person that they're affecting. So and they mean well. I just think there's a borderline that they've crossed.
Yeah. And I think to what you just said is perhaps just sitting down with them and saying, I notice sometimes you like to play in the other sandboxes. Is there something I need to know that, you're seeing? Because maybe it's a concern. Maybe it's really done, out of a good space, but just really finding out what people's intentions are is where I always go, is what are your intentions for doing that?
Absolutely.
Cathy, Lindy, any last words on that? And then we'll close this out.
I don't understand the playing in another sandbox. That I don't think I've seen that in my company. So.
You'll have to come visit me, Cathy, when this is all over. And then you'll walk away going, whoa, Heather.
But is your organization small? Or is it large?
We have about 65 people.
Yeah. I think that can happen in that size organization and in a nonprofit also.
Yeah.
I think that's
Lindy.
pretty common.
Anything for Heather? Anything? Oh, there you go. Lindy, anything for Heather on that?
On staying in your lane?
Yeah.
I mean, I can only think of a little sarcasm, sometimes sarcasm works. Like, listen, so-and-so, I know you really love to do this, but I tell my husband to stay in his lane all the time. We
picturing-
actually have a family joke now where my kids kind of know what each of us are responsible for, and sometimes my kids will be like, "Mom, stay in your lane."
I know, I'm picturing like a fire hose, you know, and like I'm blasting it, you know, because yeah, it's an issue.
Yeah, that's a really great idea, though, that some humor behind some of it after you find out what the intent is.
Yeah, you know, they say truth is said in jest, so depending on how the person can handle a little sarcasm, sometimes you can accomplish what you need to without having it be so serious.
Right.
So I want to
Thank
thank you, Lindy and Cathy, and everyone for sharing your expertise. I really appreciate your time
Thank
on
you,
putting
Lori.
it together. I hope that everyone found it helpful. We'll be back December 11th, not the third Friday. We're getting really close to Christmas.